There are men who walk into a woman's life and are instantly forgotten. Not because they're bad, but because they're too easy to understand, too predictable, too ready to be accepted. And then, there are men, not particularly handsome, not especially funny, not even very talkative, yet they live forever in her memory. Even if they only met once, even if they never held hands. The reason doesn't lie in words. It lies in how they show up. In a world where everyone is trying to impress, the man she remembers is the one who doesn't try at all. He doesn't need to tell the story of his life. All it takes is an unflinching gaze, a calm stillness in the face of silence, a half-finished sentence that her heart can't let go of. And that is the art of the man who says little but leaves so much behind. If you've ever wondered why some women can't forget a man, even though he never chased her, then this video is for you. Sit down and stay until the very end. Part 1. He speaks and she can't forget. There are men who walk into a room and leave behind a silence, not an awkward silence nor an invisible quiet, but a silence that has weight, depth, as if the air itself shifts to accommodate their presence. He doesn't need to speak. He doesn't need to try to be heard. Because something about him makes women instinctively go quiet. Not to hear sound, but to feel something. I once met a man like that. At a small coffee shop in Denver, Colorado, one March afternoon as the snow was beginning to melt outside, my friend Eliza had just ended a terrible breakup, and I pulled her out of her cramped apartment for some air. We sat by the window, searching for something light to talk about, until he walked in. That man, Matt, wasn't conventionally handsome. He wore a worn-out leather jacket, dusty shoes, and had eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. He chose the table near the counter, didn't glance at anyone, didn't force a smile, and somehow, that made him the center of the room. Eliza noticed immediately, not because of how he looked, but because of his energy. She leaned toward me and whispered, "There's something about him. He's not like the others." I saw it too, in the way he sat, not defensive, not seeking conversation, but impossible to ignore. When the waiter asked what he'd like, he answered with just 3 words, "Just black coffee." And then silence. But that silence carried with it an entire story no one dared ask about. Later, Eliza said something I'll never forget. I don't remember what he said, but I'll never forget how it felt to be seen, without being judged. True attraction doesn't lie in what he says. It lives in the space between what he says and what she doesn't yet understand. In that ambiguity, women don't find answers. They only know one thing. They want to know more. And the less they understand, the harder it is to walk away. That is the art of presence. And Matt, whether he intended to or not, stayed with Eliza long after the cafe door closed behind him. Part 2. When words are no longer weapons, but mirrors of power. Most men speak in the hope of being liked. They bend their words like spoons in a child's hand, wishing only for a smile in return. They search for nods of approval, for gentle affirmations. But what they don't realize is this. Every time they speak just to be accepted, they drift further away from their true selves. But a real man, he doesn't speak to be heard. He speaks because what he says reflects who he is. Nothing more, nothing less. I witnessed such a moment during a business conference in Chicago. In a large hall filled with rehearsed handshakes and hollow stories about quarterly profits. One man stepped onto the stage without a booming voice or flashy slides. His name was James Carter, founder of a modest tech startup that was slowly making a name. He didn't wear an expensive suit, just a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves, dark jeans, and worn-out shoes. When the mic turned on, the room expected some grand opening. But he simply said calmly, "I didn't come here to impress. I came to talk about mistakes, and why I'm no longer afraid of repeating them." No apologies, no hesitation. His voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to silence the whispers. There were no easy jokes, just calm certainty. Every word felt carefully placed. Not to boast, but to carry something honest from within. And then, something unusual happened. People leaned in. Not because he was performing, but because he didn't need to. His lack of effort was what made him magnetic. The woman beside me, a senior executive from New York, leaned close and whispered, "He's not trying to seem important." And that's exactly why I can't look away. True power doesn't come from the volume of your voice or the sharpness of your words. It comes from somewhere deeper, from knowing exactly who you are and never needing anyone else to confirm it. And when you stop seeking approval, you become the one who cannot be ignored. Not because you beg for attention, but because your presence demands it. Calm, complete, unshakable. Part 3. Women don't fall for the ones they fully understand. The more predictable a man is, the more easily she forgets him. Real love isn't born from perfect answers, but from questions left unanswered. A man who truly captivates a woman isn't the one who's always on time, always texting back, or always saying what she wants to hear. It's the one who makes her quietly wonder, what is he really thinking, even after he's already left the room. I remember a story that happened in Seattle. An old friend of mine, Rachel, is a criminal defense attorney, sharp and rational. She used to date ideal men, doctors, engineers, even a young politician. They were polite, thoughtful, always called on time, even remembered her mother's birthday. But not one of them kept her up at night. Until she met Dean. Dean didn't send flowers, didn't make grand promises. He showed up one Friday evening at a small company gathering. His gaze didn't avoid hers, but he didn't pursue either. When they talked, Dean didn't ask small talk questions, didn't boast about himself. He listened, sometimes silent, sometimes gently challenged her thoughts, with calm, unwavering confidence. Rachel told me afterward, I couldn't figure him out, and that's exactly why I couldn't stop thinking about him. Dean didn't try to be lovable. He simply was, without explanation, without pleasing. And that ambiguity led Rachel into the sweetest maze a woman can fall into: imagination. Because a woman will never truly desire what she can fully control. She might appreciate safety, but her heart, deep down, will always be awakened by the unclear, the undefined, the man she can't fully read. Love doesn't bloom in the light. It grows where there's just enough shadow to make her imagination come alive. And sometimes a single unanswered question like, who is he really, is enough to plant the seed of an unforgettable love. Part 4. The man who makes her think is the one she can't let go. Will a woman remember the men who gave her all the answers? Number, she'll forget them before midnight strikes. Because once everything is clear, the mind has nothing left to hold on to. Words offered too easily fade as fast as well wishes in the wind. But the man who leaves a gap, a sentence unfinished, a look whose meaning she can't quite grasp, That man lives on in her mind, like a story without an ending, like a dream that won't leave after she wakes. I once heard a story from Charlotte, a young writer living in Oregon. During a creative writing workshop in Portland, she met Caleb, a freelance photographer recently back from a trip to Africa. He didn't speak much. During a discussion about creative inspiration, while others shared long thoughts, Caleb simply said, "I think true inspiration comes from the things you never fully tell." The whole room went quiet for a moment. Charlotte said that she looked at him then and started to think, not just about his words, but about the man who said them. She began to imagine. What had he seen through his lens? What was he hiding behind that calm silence? And from that day on, she couldn't stop writing about a character named Caleb, a man who never explained himself, but always left behind an echo every time he appeared. That is the art of impact. Not saying too much, not over-explaining, but choosing the right moment to leave a lingering ellipsis, to plant a question she must answer on her own. When she has to imagine the rest, he's already claimed her heart without taking another step. And in the shadow of uncertainty, women begin to imagine. And once imagination is awakened, emotion begins to weave what logic cannot unravel. This isn't a game. It's the quiet precision of a man who understands. That silence, delivered at the right moment, holds more power than any promise ever could. Part 5. From emotional teddy bear to embodiment of power. There are men who enter a woman's life like fire. And there are others, no matter how sincere, who are merely a warm blanket in winter. Comfortable enough to make her smile, but never intense enough to set her heart on fire. Many men don't realize they're slowly becoming emotional teddy bears. They're the ones she confides in when she's sad, the first person she texts after a fight with her ex, the hand that comforts but never gets to be held in a real kiss. I once heard Amy tell a story about such a man. She was a grade school teacher living in Nashville, and he, Brian, was the longtime friend who was always there when she needed someone. He drove across town in the middle of the night when her car broke down. He brought her soup when she caught a cold. And every time she cried, he was the one who wiped away her tears. "He's wonderful," Amy said, "but I just don't feel it." I asked, "Don't feel what?" She replied slowly, "The spark. I feel safe, but not moved, not thrilled, not desired." That sense of safety, which seemed like a strength, turned out to be a death sentence for her emotions. Women don't dream about shelters that are too quiet. They dream of places that make them gasp, doubt themselves, struggle to interpret a glance filled with unspoken mystery. A man who makes her feel as safe as a brother, as comforting as a pillow, will always be appreciated. But the man who makes her tremble because she can't predict his next move, that is the one who captures her soul. Attraction doesn't lie in being constantly available. It lies in knowing when to create distance. Not because he's cold, but because he understands. Desire cannot grow in a space that is too easily reached. A man with power and love is not the one who does everything she needs, but the one who makes her think of him, even when she doesn't want to. And to become that man, he must first stop being the teddy bear. He must rise, grounded, steady, and full of inner strength, not to be needed, but to be desired. Part 6. The strategic absence is the art of a master. He left as quietly as he arrived. No drawn-out goodbye, no long message to explain, just a space, just wide enough for someone to fill it in with their imagination. It wasn't a mind game, nor was it coldness. It was an art form, the art of a purposeful absence. I remember a story my old friend Jenna told me as we sat together in a small bar in Charleston, South Carolina. She spoke about Cole, the man she had only met a few times through a series of contemporary art workshops. Cole wasn't like anyone else. He didn't ask cliché flirtatious questions, nor did he share much about himself. But every time he spoke, Jenna felt the world slow down by one beat. He left her with a strange feeling. Not quite fascination, but a kind of disquiet. Then one day, he vanished from her daily rhythm. No more quick conversations during breaks. No more glances exchanged across the room. Jenna didn't understand why. She didn't know if she had done something wrong. And that very uncertainty became the ticking clock inside her mind, spinning in circles. Where is he? Did he forget about me? But no, Cole hadn't truly disappeared. He had merely stepped back, leaving just enough space for her imagination to awaken. She began replaying every look, every brief moment. Every word that once felt meaningless now seemed to carry weight. He doesn't need to stay to be present, because now he lives in her mind. That's something strong men understand. Sometimes, the greatest presence comes not from being there, but from the echo they leave behind. A glance that was never explained, a sentence left unfinished, a retreat that carried no complaint. That is the art of a man who knows how to control space and memory, because women may forget the one who stayed too long, but they will never forget the one who left at the right moment, leaving behind a space no one else can fill. Part 7. The Strategy of Leaving an Echo. A wise man doesn't need to finish the conversation. He leaves it hanging, like a piece of music that stops at its climax, where the listener never finds the final note. He understands that the unsaid often haunts more deeply than any confession. I remember a spring evening in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Under the soft golden light of a small wine bar, where artists and drifters gathered, my friend Haley told me about an encounter she could never forget. The man's name was Logan. He wasn't conventionally handsome like someone from the movies, but his eyes were bright, like he was always watching the world through a lens no one else could see. They happened to share a table during an impromptu poetry workshop. Logan didn't say much, but every time he opened his mouth, the room seemed to hold its breath to listen. When Haley asked him a simple question, "What do you think is the hardest part about a relationship?" Logan looked at her for a moment, then replied slowly, "There's something about you that pulls me in and unsettles me at the same time. And I'm still not sure if that's something to fear or something worth exploring." Then he went silent. No explanation. No nervous laugh. No follow-up. Just a sip of wine, letting the sentence drift into the space between them. Soft, but sharp like a quiet blade slicing through her emotional armor. Later, Haley told me, "I don't know what he really meant. And that's exactly why I can't stop thinking about it. Because the human brain hates the unresolved. It craves reasons. It searches for closure. But the heart, it thrives on the incomplete. An unfinished sentence, a look left unexplained, a curiosity that refuses to die. Logan wasn't trying to be intriguing. He simply left an ellipsis and let Haley write the rest of the story in her own mind. That wasn't a trick. It was strategy. To create an echo not through words, but through deliberate absence. And maybe, just maybe, it's that very absence that makes someone unforgettable. Part 8. Return, but not to apologize. After a long enough silence to turn memory into a question, he returned, but not with an apology. "No, I'm sorry for disappearing. No, I've just been busy." No justifications. He simply left one message. Short, vague, and haunting. "I dreamed about you last night. Not sure if I should tell you." And that was enough. Enough to crack the armor she had spent weeks building back up. Enough for her curiosity to surpass her pride. No promises. No long letters. Just a single unfinished sentence. I once heard a story like that from Lauren, an artist living in Northern California. She met Jackson at a painting exhibition in Monterey. He was a lighting designer for theater productions, quiet and a little reserved. They met only a few times. Their conversations brief. Sometimes just a hello, sometimes a glance held a moment too long. Then one day, Jackson stopped showing up to the usual gatherings. No more presence, no more familiar glimpses in her social circles. Lauren didn't ask. She said she didn't care. But 3 weeks later, during a heavy rainstorm, a message appeared on her phone. "I saw you in a dream. You were walking through blue light. And then you turned back. But you didn't say a word." That was it. No, "How are you?" No invitation to talk, no open door. And yet Lauren said her heart beat faster than it had for any love letter in the past. She read it at least 10 times, trying to figure out what blue light meant and why he dreamed of her after all that silence. Jackson didn't come back to beg for forgiveness. He returned with a slightly open door and let her be the one to walk through it. While other men were trying desperately to win back attention with pleas and explanations, he chose to let mystery do the work. And as Lauren said, "I don't know what he wants, but I know I want to find out." When you return without apology, you do not lower yourself. You don't explain. You simply drop a question, and that very question becomes the hook lodged in her mind, silent but impossible to pull out. Part 9. The ending, when words are just the shadow of energy. In the end, what she carries with her isn't the exact words he said, but the way he looked at her, quietly, yet without the slightest trace of fear. It's the calm within him during the silence. The kind of silence that most people rush to fill with awkwardness. There are men who walk into a woman's life not to say much, but to leave behind a pause. And in that pause, she begins to hear herself. She begins to ask questions. She begins to remember. Not because he created an emotion, but because he stirred something inside her she never thought she could feel. A look that made her feel seen, yet unable to predict what might come next. An unfinished sentence that made her write 100 endings in her mind. None of them quite enough. That man didn't need to dominate the conversation, didn't need to prove anything. He simply needed to be there, fully, steadily, with quiet strength. He wasn't in the conversation, he was in her subconscious. And in a world where everything is loud, what a woman remembers forever is the man who knew how to be silent at the right moment, who knew when to stop, and left just enough space for her to walk into. Do you want to be that man? You don't need to chase. You don't need to convince. You only need to understand one thing. Speak less. Show up deeper. It's not a technique. It's power.